I didn't come here with a big presentation to try and make any sales here. Really, my goal here today is just to leave you guys a little bit better off with a little bit more education in regards to how credit repair works, and also how the credit bureaus score us and how the credit bureaus themselves function. And a little background on me is I've been around credit repair utilizing industries for 28 years. I've been hands-on with credit for 21 years. 10 years of which was in the mortgage lending industry. I was a branch manager overseeing multiple offices. I got involved in auto finance for a couple years, and I've been doing credit repair for a little over 8. And I'm a national manager for an organization out of Alabama. It's a private group. It's basically consists of a bunch of paralegals and some credit law attorneys that do things real right. They've been doing it for 20 years and headhunted me, and here I am 8 years later. But ultimately, let's start with basically my presentation here. Let's focus the first 20 minutes on education. I'll open up the last 10 minutes to questions if anybody's got anything. Let's start with the credit bureaus first. The credit bureaus like to market themselves as consumer advocate organizations. At the end of the day, what they really are is they're marketing companies. They compile our data and they sell it to whoever will buy it. And at the end of the day, they don't even like dealing with a consumer. I don't know if anybody in here has tried to reach out to a credit bureau, but it's a nightmare, trying to jump through their hoops. I've got ways around those hoops to get through the gatekeepers, if anybody ever needs that. But ultimately, their goal, let's back up a second, is they're all privately held organizations, and they're all for-profit. They all make over $1 billion a year collecting our data and selling it to whoever will buy it. And so because of that dynamic, ultimately they're trying to, over the years that I've been involved in credit, what I've come to realize is that they seem to want to keep us between a 580 and a 640. And the reason being is that that's the most valuable data to be sold. So if any of you are in that price or in that range of score, you're probably getting inundated with, you've been pre-approved for this and pre-approved for that. What those companies are doing is they're buying lists of people between 580 and 640 because the people in that demographic qualify for that company's products or services. However, it's at the highest interest rates that they can offer. And you start getting up over 680, 700, 720, you're getting 0% interest rates on credit cards, you're getting 1%, 2%, 3% on automobiles, 4.5% on homes, and there's not a lot of meat on the bone for the companies that are offering the financing. However, the people between a 580 and a 640 get pounded over the head in the process and ultimately end up getting put into a worse position 9 times out of 10. So I've heard a lot of people in here ask for money here tonight. If you can get your credit scores over a 700 or 720, the doors swing wide open for you as far as whatever you need financially. No matter what we're trying to qualify for in life, whether it's credit cards or business loans or mortgages or investment money or insurance even, job promotions, cars, every company functions off what's called a pricing matrix. And if you can picture this as a generalization, if you can picture this triangle in the corner of the room, on the left-hand side going up the wall are credit scores, and they always go in 20-point increments typically, up over 700, and then across the ceiling you have loan-to-values or ranges, and it creates a triangle full of boxes like a piece of graph paper. And on the left-hand side going up the wall are the scores. They're called pricing tiers. And they're so strict you can actually miss an upper tier by 1 point because ultimately the creditor wants to charge us more, not less. And there are ways around that with compensating factors, as some people in here know. But ultimately, the higher we're up that ladder, the better the deals get on stuff. And let's talk about just a $200,000 loan. A 0.5% difference will make a difference of tens of thousands of dollars you'll pay that company in interest out of the first couple of years. So with that said, there's always ways to tweak credit scores. And that's enough about the bureaus. Let's talk about how they score us. Ultimately, the algorithms for each credit bureau are different. And the credit bureaus themselves, the algorithms are measuring over 100 components in a profile, but as a generalization, it's broken into 3 categories. And those 3 categories would be old closed out accounts that were paid well. Those will stay in our profiles for 10 years statistically and organically fall off at that point, and that's after last activity date or when the account was closed. The second section, and the more the better, it's kind of like a teeter-totter of positive versus negative in the algorithm. And then the second section is what I call the weeds in the garden, the junk. So late pays and charge-offs and collections and public record. and inquiries, that type of stuff holds down our scores. And so with negative data, it goes 7 years from the original delinquency date on like late pays. It goes 7 years from the last activity date on closed out charge-offs, collections, 7 years from file date in public record area, and then inquiries are 24 months. And if there's anything that's included in a bankruptcy, that's 10 years from those same types of dynamic. The third section is open accounts, open trade lines, how they're being managed, how long they've been open, balance on credit cards, type of accounts, payment history. And so the best way I can equate credit repair or how things are scored is it's kind of like a chess game or a puzzle. So, you know, there's several people in here that I work with, and aside from the folks that are in this room that I've worked with, that I've had experiences with that could give testimonials, I also do credit repair for the vice president of the SBA administration, multiple people on her team. I also do loans or credit repair for military loans, so I do a lot of work with people that are retiring from the military, getting into franchises. And I've been blessed to, by word of mouth, like the first year I marketed, and by word of mouth, I've got clients and resources across the country at this point. So when looking into credit repair for anybody or trying to maximize your credit score, this industry is very polluted. It would be the best word I could use, with a lot of people that take advantage of folks. You know, the person's in a bad spot, they're hungry to get their credit scores up further, and there's just a really bad stigma about credit repair companies as a whole, because it's essentially an unregulated industry. And for myself, I function underneath, even though I'm a national manager, Versatile Consulting is actually my business. I function underneath my own brand. I'm one of the few credit repair companies in Wisconsin that's actually registered and bonded with the WDFI, which is a very difficult process to accomplish. If anybody in here has ever tried to work with the DFI, Wisconsin's the strictest state in the nation for guidelines that need to be met. But at the end of the day, as far as scoring is concerned, there's always ways to, for lack of a better word, massage the information. It's not just about disputing information and pulling it out, which let's dig into that, how disputing works. The Fair Credit Reporting Act came out in 1970, and that's the law that's used no matter what the company is, whether it's you doing your credit repair, whether it's a company doing your credit repair. The Fair Credit Reporting Act is the law that's in place in 1970, which was designed to prevent mistakes and misreporting on credit bureaus. Well, fast forward 48 years, 49 years at this point, 8 out of 10 credit bureaus still have mistakes and misreporting on them. So it's not uncommon that, and it's really just human error. You know, it's not an intentional thing most often, but you got people that work at the credit bureau level and work at the creditor level that just sit there and drone over data all day long, and mistakes happen. If you're looking at numbers and letters all day long, you're going to make a mistake. And so because of that dynamic is the only reason that credit repair even works. But when you do credit repair, the process is that you have to follow this law, which in short, what that law says is that we as consumers have the right to dispute inaccurate, erroneous, outdated, or incomplete information. And the word incomplete is what opens the door to challenge anything. So whether you believe it's accurate or not, what that law does to protect us is to require that the creditor and the credit bureaus report that account 100% accurate, which is very uncommon, to say the least. And that comes down to open date, balance, payment history, closeout date, last activity date. I mean, it gets pretty, account number. If that stuff's not being reported accurately, by law, you can sue them for $10,000 per occurrence. Now, reality is it's going to cost you more than 10 grand to try and take them to court for the 10 grand, so most people don't pursue it. But what you can do is you can utilize the law to dispute this information. Now, when it comes to companies that do this, there's 3 different business models for credit repair or to put yourself in a better position when it comes to this data, which is you can dispute online, which a human being never ever looks at it. Ultimately, it's all done by computer, and the removal rates are extremely low. The second process is you can do form letters like a Lexington Law does. Lexington Law is the #1 company in the country for credit repair. But their business model, typically, their average completion time is 12 months. So they hook people on this process of give us $200 as a setup fee. We're going to charge you $100 a month for the next however many months it takes to complete it. And there's no motivation for them to finish the job. Their job and their motivation is to keep you in that funnel as long as they can. And they probably got over 1 million people in their funnel paying $100 a month. I had a guy out of Florida. He had been with them for 3.5 years. The very first month, I had my legal team go after their stuff. We got 35% of the information off. First month. So going from the form letter approach to what we do, which is customized letters. So this legal team that I use, they'll customize letters. They go on an attorney letterhead. They got an attorney signature on them. We include the 3 forms of ID and color copies. We send everything certified mail. And basically cross the T's and dot the I's to make sure we get the best results. Now, to put that in perspective, is industry averages for credit repair are 6 to 12 months for completion. Industry averages for removal rates of the data that's challenged is 25 to 30%, which is good. I mean, let's look at reality. Reality is that information is supposed to be there for 7 years. So anything that comes off through credit repair really is just microwaving the process of allowing somebody to move forward in life sooner than they would otherwise, waiting for things to fall off organically. Is kind of what it comes down to, is it just speeds up the process. Because let's look at, and here's what I can say, is that the most honest they can be about credit repair or challenging data for removal is that you never know what you're going to get till you do it. Anybody that tells you anything different than that is lying to you. You got to have a good approach. You have to follow the law. You have to, have a well-written letter. And ultimately, there's over 100 different strategies for how you write those letters to get results. But there's those 3 different disputing tactics, which is online, form letters, and customized letters. Well, form letters used to work before Credit Karma. The reality is that Credit Karma came out and consumer awareness went through the roof. Now, everybody, prior to Credit Karma, the only time anybody got a chance to look at their credit is when they got turned down for something, and so they like to keep you in the dark. The more, even today, everybody in this room is entitled to annualcreditreport.com. Go to annual credit report, you're entitled 1 tri-merge report, or 1 bureau from each bureau per year, but they're going to send it to you in 3 different formats. And I've been looking at credit for 21 years, and it confused me when I looked at it. So their goal is to keep people ignorant, or so that they don't have the ability to ruffle their feathers, because at the end of the day, they don't like consumers. They don't want to deal with a consumer. They want to keep on selling the information. As a matter of fact, they'll come out with a new law or a new strategy or structure, to the scoring models this year, which they're going to roll out in the South first. But basically, you can gain yourself an extra 20 points if you supply your banking information. So you can supply your banking information, your ledger, to get yourself that other 20 points. Well, going back to that pricing matrix, an extra 20 points may make the difference. 1 point can make the difference of qualifying for something or not, but it can also make the difference of getting a better interest rate or not. So from that standpoint, it makes sense. However, their main goal is to figure out what your spending habits are and how much money you have in your account, so that they can determine how to target market you that much better. So it's a frickin' scam. Forgive me for saying it that way, but it's a broken system, to say the least. And people get taken advantage of. All of us are getting taken advantage of by this broken system that is geared to make money, not protect the consumer, even though that's the way they present the information. So at the end of the day, besides removing negative data, let's go back to reality. It's a software program. So when you yank out a collection, or you yank out a charge off, or a late pay, or a public record, and let me say this, is that the progression of damage to scores goes from a 30-day late, 60, 90, 120. Sometimes it turns into a 150. Sometimes it goes to a 180. But typically at a 120 mark, it'll turn into a charge-off. When an account turns into a charge-off, it just means that the creditor wrote it off as a loss in their taxes. At that point, it becomes what's called zombie debt. And zombie debt is for purchase or for sale. And so they might write off 10 Gs, for example. And that collection company might purchase that debt for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar, and then they jack it up with all their fees and rates, and then they come at you hard. Which, let me mention this, is if anybody gets into a position where they have a collection, the very first letter that you receive from a collection company, by law, has to state at the bottom of that letter, we're in the process of trying to collect a debt. If this is not your debt, you need to notify us in writing within the next 30 days. Otherwise, we're going to assume it is your debt, and we're going to begin the collection process. If you respond to that, which most people don't, because by the time they get a collection notice, they're already frustrated with life, and they're bummed out, and things are bad, and so typically they just pitch it in the garbage because they don't want to deal with it. But if you take the approach of when you get that first letter that says that statement on the bottom, if you write them in writing and say, this is not my account, I request that you cease and desist any more collection efforts, this is not my account, thank you. And just leave it simple. When you respond like that, they cannot list it on your credit bureau. But if you don't respond, it'll be on your credit bureau in 30 days. And collections can cost you 20 to 40 points a whack, so ultimately that's kind of how the process works. Now with me, I've done a little over 4,000 credit repairs in the last 8 years and some change, and I'm kind of a tracking freak. And so as of this morning, I was tracking a 56.2% average removal rate at the end of 2 months. So this legal team that I use, because they do custom letters, whether somebody's got 2 disputes or 3,000 disputes, hypothetically, all those letters can go out the same day. Whereas when you use form letters, you can only trickle them out, a little bit, 5 here and 10 there. And the Bureau's actually put in a system, not a couple years back, where these letters get flagged as frivolous if you send in form letters. So if there's too much verbiage that's the same, they'll actually get flagged as frivolous and no investigation will even occur. But the way that it's broken. So, but the way that it functions, when you dispute information, you have to dispute it through the reporting agency. You have to meet the requirements, which we always do. At that point, they're obligated by this federal law to investigate with a creditor. And then by federal law, that creditor's got 30 days to respond, which in the law, it doesn't specify if it's 30 calendar days or 30 business days, which I'm pretty sure was intentional. But at the end of the day, you got these 30 days. So when you go through a full round of repair, you pull up that updated report, you cross-reference the new data with the original data. Whatever items are gone, they're gone. There's no record of it. It's gone. Which reminds me to mention is if anybody's got collections or charge-offs, one of the biggest mistakes you can do is try and make a payment on that. Here's the sick truth, is that as soon as you give them $1, it resets the statute of limitations on that particular account. So that might be a 6-year-old account that's got, you pull up your bureau and you're trying to get financing, you see you owe somebody $50 for whatever, and you decide that you want to do the right thing and you give that creditor a call. And I'm not telling anybody not to pay your bills, so let me make that clear. But at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. And here's how it works, is you call those guys up and you try and do the right thing, you give them a payment, it'll reset the statute of limitations on it. Now you got to wait 7 years for it to come off again. So it's just such a broken system to try and keep us down so that they can sell the more valuable data so that the finance companies can make that much more money. It's just the sad truth.
So you're saying that they would put a $50 deficiency on your credit report even though it was much higher than that? And then your $50 payment would basically bring all the debt that was behind that payment into the foreground?
No. So let's call it a 5-year-old charter bill for $50, just for example. And you say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and square this debt up. You give them a call and you pay off the $50. A lot of people are under the assumption that if they pay a collection, that it comes off their bureau. That's not the case. What ends up happening is it resets the last activity date on that particular account. And the last activity date is what the time frame runs off of in order to determine when it falls up, when it's supposed to fall off organically. So as soon as it might be 6 years old. If you just waited it out 12 months, it would fall off on its own and it would erase.
So what would happen is you're square with the creditor, but it's not going to come off of the credit bureau until it ages off.
Correct. Yeah. The only caveat to that would be medical. Sometimes you can negotiate removals of medical, but with medical, it doesn't typically hold up the closing of a mortgage. Mortgages are typically the only ones that really care whether or not there's an open charge-off or open collection that's non-medical. That needs to be squared up. And typically,
it seems like that would be a bargaining chip that you could use to say, well, look, I'll pay this off if you'll take it out of my credit, if you'll satisfy.
That's the first way you come out of the gates with it, but 9 out of 10 will tell you to pound sand, basically, for lack of a better.
If you can close that account, though, it does seem to increase your credit score. It may not increase it as much as it's falling off, but it increases it versus you just saying they're delinquent.
If it registers in the comment section of the account as paid in full, it will increase your score. If it says settled for less than full balance, it doesn't do jack really. Yeah.
But if you settled it for full balance and it says settled for less than full, then you can complain and then they have to wipe it off.
Yeah. So if you're gonna actually call up and negotiate something, you always offer them 25 cents. My advice is that if anybody's got open charge offs or open collections, let me try and get them off first, or let somebody try and get them off first. But I'd like an opportunity to do so. But to answer your question is, if you can get it removed, let's call it a collection or a charge off, if you can get that account actually removed, you might see a 20, 30, 40 point bump. Whereas if you call them up and square it up, you can either choose to pay it in full, in which case you never give any of these guys any money until you've got a letter stating whatever the agreement is that you just made over the phone. Don't give them $1. Say, hey, look, I tell you what, you always come out of the gates, if you're gonna try and negotiate, here's some advice. So if you're gonna try and negotiate a collection or charge off, you always offer them 20 cents on the dollar first. And the approach that you wanna take to them, I'll just role play with you. Hey, I just pulled an updated report on myself and I noticed that I've got this account and I owe you X, Y, Z. 3? Oh, yep. And I'm trying to get this account off here, and I tell you what, I'm actually considering doing bankruptcy, but rather than take that approach, I'd rather square this up with you if I can. Just out of curiosity, if I gave you, let's say you owe them $2,000, if I gave you $400, would you be willing to settle with me? And it becomes a used car sale at that point. You go back and forth until you come up with a number that works. But either way, you're going to come out of there paying a lot less than you would have if you just called up and tried to settle it. Once they agree on the number, then you say, well, like I said, I'm pretty tight on cash. I'm barely putting food on my table at the moment. But hypothetically, if I was able to get you this cash in the next 48 hours, would you be willing to settle with me? Or would you be willing to remove it from the report? No. Okay, cool. Well, would you be willing to mark it as paid in full rather than settled? No. Okay, cool. Well, if I was able to get you this money, would you consider it settled in full? Yes. Okay, and you'll report it to all 3 bureaus that way? Yes. Okay, great. What I need you to do is send me a document on your company letterhead stating this agreement. Once I receive that, I'll scrounge this money up and I'll get it to you in the next 48 hours. That way, at least you've got the documentation you need to fall back on, because they're going to say whatever they need to collect. So that's kind of the approach that you would take with that. Hopefully that helped. Is that it? Am I out of time?
If you got one more question.
One more question. Anybody?
So how often does that process work?
Say that.
How often does that process work in terms of receiving a letter from a creditor?
30 business days. So
Do they normally send that letter when you put in a request?
Oh, you're talking about if you negotiate a deal?
Right.
If you negotiate a deal, they should be able to email it to you right there at the end of the conversation. Yeah, once you get it. But to dispute something takes 30 business days to get a response back from the creditor based on federal law.
What happens if you don't get a letter?
If you don't get a letter, then you don't give them $1.
But like if it's still on, let's say if you still have something on your report but you didn't get a letter.
So are you talking about if you're negotiating a payoff?
No. I mean, I'll just use an example. Several years ago, Trucker set up 2 accounts in my name.
Okay.
And then one of the accounts they sent me to collections for.
Okay.
I never got a letter because I was still an account holder. I was paying bills, but I got sent to collections for it. And then,
Yep.
so I had to work to get that off. But
It happens every day, man. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It'd be nice. Each bureau is supposed to send what's called a resolution letter at the end of each at the end of each round. Half the time they don't even do it. Yeah, it'd blow your mind if I was able to take the time to share all the variables with all this stuff. Go ahead.
So like you're pretty familiar with Kevin Trudeau?
Trudeau.
And all the debt practices
Yep.
and all that?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
So it's like, I see a lot of stuff lining up. And what you're saying.
Well, that's good. You're comparing me to that cat? All right, sweet.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll take that as a compliment. One more.
So those of us who are dealing with renters deals, people who have coming credit all the time, do we send them your way? What do you charge to help them take care of them?
Okay, so industry averages for credit repair costs are typically $200 as a setup fee, and then they'll charge somewhere between $75 and $150 a month. It'll take them 10 to 12 months to complete the repair. I do it. A single repair for me is typically $795 to $995. Considering you guys are friends with Chris and you're part of this group, I do preferred pricing, which I do with a lot of my major referral sources, which would be $595 to $695 on a single repair. That covers the whole process. It can be split into 2 payments if need be. over 30 days. And then joint repairs are typically $1,000 to $1,395. Considering you're coming from here, it'd be $795 to $995, which also can be split into 2 payments. And it is a business write-off as a business consulting fee.
But you're not taking care of just one trade line with that
We
product?
dispute it all, everything. Inquiries, everything negative in that profile gets pounded.
And if anything comes back on it within 60 days or something like that? what happens?
It's, in 8 years of doing it, I've only seen that maybe 3 or 4 times with these guys. I mean, they when it's off, it's off.
Okay.
Yep. Though, with the one caveat to that real quick, and I'll step off the stage here, is every now and then a collection company that you got to that it got removed of, maybe a year down the road, they might sell it to another collection company because they weren't able to collect. So then it'll get relisted by that new company. And I do follow up if somebody needs a 3rd round, like down the road or something like that. It's typically $275. I always do it for $1.09. I'm way underpriced for what I offer, to be honest with you. But I like to keep it fair, and I'm not greedy, and I'd rather just help more people if I can. So thank you for your time.
All right, guys, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.